Joining us now, Congressman, Democrat, 3rd District, Virginia, my Congressman, Congressman Bobby Scott. Congressman, great to have you.
John, it's good to be with you. How's Atlanta?
Never better. Always good to be here. Almost 3 decades here. So I got a lot of friends when I come down. I got a lot of inside info. And it's good to be here in the Big A. And, of course, a lot of people excited about the Atlanta Braves. They're a 2-game lead. Nobody expected them to do anything. And I come down here and everybody makes fun of the Nationals. Not good. Not good. If you're a Nats fan, let me tell you what, 9 games out. And you got Atlanta Braves fans making fun of him. Just saying. I just throw that out there. You guys do what you want. Congressman Scott with us right now. Boy, we've got a lot to talk about today. The first thing is on everybody's mind. I just got to tell you this. I mean, President Trump revoked John Brennan's security clearance. Okay, I get it. Why don't they just revoke everybody's security clearance? Why do you need a security clearance to make money when you're no longer serving the federal government or the national interest or the people? I mean, it seems to be kind of scammy to me, Congressman. You know, you get a security clearance, you serve the people, that's your job. You get out, you keep the clearance, and then you go to private industry, lobbying firms, K Street, and you make millions of dollars off of that access. Is that a good thing?
Well, the first question I had, if you have a security clearance, it's not my understanding that you're entitled to go get classified information. You can receive classified information if somebody wants to discuss it with you, but you can't go. You just can't show up at the CIA and say, "Tell me what's going on here, and let me see these documents." It's all need to know. And the former executives in previous administrations may have some peculiar knowledge or about a situation, and a present CIA person or Department of Defense person may want to call and find out what did you do in that situation, what are the people that were helpful, just kind of behind-the-scenes discussions. If you don't have a security clearance, you can't have that discussion. But it's not my understanding that you are entitled to anything outside of a need-to-know basis. So I'm not sure exactly what he's had access to that is not helpful to people on the inside right now.
But the thing is, I mean, whether it's, and I've made this argument because I think this should be nonpartisan, whether the security clearance is being revoked from Brennan or General McMaster, neither of them are serving the government. Neither of them, like John Bolton is not calling up General McMaster and asking him his advice. I mean, he's just not doing it, okay?
You have all of the, you talked about bipartisan, there's a long bipartisan list of previous high-ranking officials that have come out against this because of the benefit that present workers can find calling them and discussing sensitive information behind the scenes. But I'm not clear what has been revoked, other than the opportunity when someone wants it to discuss sensitive information with things that may have gone on in a previous administration. You lose that, and there may be you may want to find out who are the people on the ground in that other country who were helpful, who were credible, names that they may not know. Who are your assets on the ground? How did you get out of the situation? Those are the kind of things that you can only discuss with someone that has a security clearance. And so I'm not sure exactly what is revoked, other than the opportunity when you want to take it to try to get out of complicated situations.
Okay, this
and there's a long bipartisan list of previous administration officials, bipartisan, that think it's a good idea to have that opportunity if you want it. And if they don't want to talk to somebody, they don't have to.
Look, you got a lot of people making money off of this. Both of you and I know this is kind of how the swamp works. And I think working people in your district and around Virginia and the country are just getting sick of this whole thing, quite frankly. Congressman, this just an off-the-wire president.
If you use the classified information, if you reveal it at all, I think that's a crime.
Well, but then there's just having access to it and giving you the opportunity to get jobs.
You don't have access to it. You can receive it.
Well,
if somebody wants to give it to you, you don't have the. You don't have it. It doesn't authorize you to go get classified information. I'd say, I wonder what's going on here. Let me check it out. No, you don't. You can't go into the State Department or CIA and get classified information. It's only available if somebody inside wants to talk to you about it. Then you need a security clearance. Otherwise, they can't talk to you.
Well, if that's the case, then revoking Brennan's security clearance shouldn't make a damn bit of difference, because they're only going to give it to him if he needs it. So that's a whole separate argument. I got to move on. Just want to report this just in: President Trump canceling the military parade that he was talking about, saying that the price tag on it is ridiculous. So that has been canceled. Congressman, I want to get to something that we've been talking about for a few weeks because it's finally coming up.
I think there was strong bipartisan opposition to the kind of parade he was talking about. I mean, it just did not reflect American values and looked like it's something that would happen in a dictatorship. We have parades where we display most of the display is the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And not the ballistic missiles and things like that.
Well, when you've got tonight 5,000 veterans sleeping in drain pipes in Los Angeles, seems to me that money could be spent in a little more prudent way. So I was opposed to this idea of a parade.
Well, I was opposed to it too. I think in terms of homelessness, Virginia can be proud of the fact that it was the first state in the Union to effectively end homelessness for veterans. That doesn't mean it eliminated it, but it means that the homelessness amongst veterans is rare and brief. And we were proud to get the first designation from the United States government as a state that had effectively eliminated homelessness for veterans. We have a lot of veterans in this area. They served courageously and protected our freedom. And the idea that they are now homeless, I think, is something we should be ashamed of. And the problem in Los Angeles is just out of control.
It is, and when you look at spending any money on some sort of a parade where you're sending tanks up and down the road, I mean, it's just unconscionable to me with what's going on with our veterans that we would spend a dime on that. So I'm glad the president canceled it. Congressman, you and I have
hopefully he'll redirect the money that he was going to spend to homelessness. That kind of those millions of dollars would go a long way in addressing the problem.
It sure would. And Los Angeles is of epidemic proportions now, and so that we've got to do something. I'd been Secretary Ben Carson on the other day, and we talked about that, and he's got an effort underway in order to find affordable housing for people, and he said that LA is the biggest issue because the property is too expensive, and so they're trying to figure that out. You and I have been advocates of prison reform since the day we met a very long time ago. Think of what you will about Jared Kushner. He finally has got the ball moving. But what I wanted to talk about for a couple minutes is something that goes off everybody's radar screen, which is our system in this country, sir, of cash bail. And the number of people that are in jails because they can't raise the $1,500, $2,000, $5,000 bail, or they can't raise the 15% the bail bondsman wants. And so they sit in jail without due process for 50 days, 60 days, 80 days. Meantime, they lose their job, their car gets repossessed, they get evicted from their apartment or their room. This has got to be the most discriminatory system we've had, because basically it says you're going to go to jail based on your economic means. I mean, you can't get more discriminatory with that. How do we change that?
Well, you have to change it. I think you've articulated the problem, and there was a survey that some enormous portion of the American public would have trouble, if pressed, to come up with $400. If somebody's in jail, obviously bail is going to be somewhere a couple $100, a couple of $1,000, and it is based on wealth. Your freedom is based on wealth. It ought to be based on risk. Does the judge think you are a flight risk? If he doesn't believe you're a flight risk, you should be able to go like everybody else. And the assessment should be based on risk, not wealth. And as you've articulated, bad things happen when you're in jail for 2 or 3 months. You can't make, you're not working, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your car payment. What kind of job are you going to have where you call the boss and say, I'm in jail, I'll be out in about 2 or 3 months home? No, they're going to hire somebody else. And so you've articulated a very difficult problem, and some states have already changed. New Jersey has changed. I think Richmond, Virginia, Commonwealth Attorney is looking at risk-based rather than wealth-based release before trial. You got to remember these are people who have not been convicted of anything.
Right.
And
no,
so they're entitled to a
process.
presumption of innocence, and they're being held in jail for 3 months. If they're found not guilty,
that's right.
They've suffered all that. And there's also another huge incentive to plead guilty to get a punishment of time served. You go into court, plead guilty, you get out. If you go to trial, you may be found guilty and get more time. And so it has a undue pressure on guilty pleas. You'd mentioned prison reform. You know, with criminal justice issues are easy once you've decided whether you're trying to reduce crime and save money, or codify a bunch of slogans and sound bites using fear-mongering and nonsense. Once you've made your decision, the rest is easy. And Kushner and many others, bipartisan support from doing intelligent things that will, based on evidence and research, reduce crime and save money. Now, unfortunately, there's still bipartisan support for the slogans and sound bites, and so it's hard to make progress. But some states, Texas for one, saved billions, potentially billions of dollars, making the choice to follow the evidence and reducing crime and saving money, and they've saved a lot of money and reduced crime in the process, rather than pay for all the prisons that are necessary when you're doing the slogans and sound bites.
Well, the slogans and sound bites like 3 strikes you're out, lock 'em up, etc., you know, those are a direct result of following the money. Because if you look at the cash bail system, and every time we try to bring this up, the lobbyists that are hired by the bail bondsman firms that make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in the business that they're in, they all come out and they descend on D.C. and they talk to various congressmen on the various committees, and it all gets stopped. And then you try to get prison reform done, and here's your problem. Your problem is we've gone to the bulk of our prisons in this country, Congressman Bobby Scott, are private profit-making enterprises, many of them trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Now, how sick is that? That is sick. They make money.
That's one problem. And another problem, some states have actually contracted with the for-profit prisons, guaranteeing a certain number of prisoners.
That's right.
I think that's unconscionable. But I'll tell you, as somebody that's been involved in this, that's one outside pressure. But most of the wrong choices are just made by politicians trying to get elected. And so the slogans and sound bites and the foolishness and the fear-mongering, they believe it'll help them get elected. And I think the public is a little ahead of the politicians on this. I think they've gotten about sick and tired of people yelling slogans at crowds, knowing that the evidence and research shows that those slogans do nothing. Some of them actually increase the crime rate, when we know there are initiatives that can reduce crime and save money based on evidence and research, and you're not doing those, you're doing the foolishness. And I think the public is catching up with the people.
Now, let's talk about the Higher AIM Act, or let's call it the AIM Higher Act. AIM Higher Act, which is your new bill, which is backed by Democratic leadership. And I assume if the Democrats take over, you're going to vote for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker, right?
Well, I think everybody will look at everybody, but I think when we get there, my guess is that Nancy will be the person who worked the hardest to get us into a majority. Don't take over a majority. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but if we're in the majority and we're voting for Speaker, I think we'll look and see that Nancy Pelosi did more to get us there than anybody else. She also has the ability to call in the diverse parts of the Democratic caucus, get us in a room, discuss an issue, and have us coming out voting the same way. When I got to Congress, 20 or 30 Democrats voting the other way was not unusual. Now, she's able to get alternatives such that everybody feels comfortable with it, and 2 or 3 votes breaking away is actually unusual. I'm not sure who else has that kind of capability. Some of the more progressive members are saying they want a new generation, but I think when you look at the choices, Ms. Pelosi will be as progressive as anybody else that wants to be Speaker.
So tell us about your AIM Hire Act, which is
AIM Hire. There are 2 different views of what ought to happen in higher education. The Republicans, out of committee, all the Republicans voted for what's called the Prosper Act, and it cuts $15 billion out of student aid. It makes student loans harder to pay off. It cuts some programs to help people get into college. It diverts billions of dollars to the for-profit sector, which has been notorious in having bad apples like Trump University and others that have closed abruptly, and it reduces regulation on them. It makes college more expensive and student loans harder to pay off. That's their view. All of the Republicans voted for it, and it's pending floor action now. I've introduced the AIM Hire Act, which increases access to college by making first 2 years of college, community college, free, tuition-free, works with states to have them invest more in state colleges to bring the tuition down. It makes student loans for those that take out loans easier to pay off. One program, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, if you work in a public service firm, the military, teaching, Commonwealth's Attorney or Public Defender's Office for lawyers, if you work there 10 years, your debt will be discharged after that. There are a lot of ways that student loans are easier to pay off. Getting and paying for college is more accessible. There are supports for people when they're in college to help them graduate. And so they're just 2 different versions. AIM Hire Act makes college more accessible, student loans easier to pay off. The Prosper Act increases the cost of college for many people, and student loans are harder to pay off. And the for-profit sector has less regulation. Depending on who's in the majority at the end of after this election, we'll decide which way we go with higher education, whether it's easier. And the AIM Hire Act also makes it possible for those not going to a 4-year college or even a 2-year college to use their Pell Grants for programs that help them get a credential. They'll help them get a good job, like a welding certificate or truck driving course or something that's not as long as presently required, but you can get a significant benefit, and you can use your Pell Grant for those. It's much better for those getting those certificates or higher education, makes it cheaper, and it's just a different vision whether or not you're going to help young people get the education that gets a good career.
So, Congressman Bobby Scott, have you talked to a single Republican about your AIM Hire Act? Have you had a conversation with a single member of the GOP on the specifics of what you just outlined to our audience?
We've talked. We don't have much Republican support, and let me tell you, the Republicans don't have in the committee they had 0 Democratic support for making student loans harder to pay off and increasing the cost of college and diverting money from the nonprofit sector to the for-profit sector. You don't have any we have a partisan divide in our view towards higher education. And when we, after the election, we'll get together and see who has the votes to go either backwards or forwards. When President Johnson signed the Higher Education Act in 1965, he said that the act would allow any student in any state to apply to any university or college in the United States and not be turned away because the family is poor. Right. And for years that was the case. Any college you could get into, you could afford to go. And now you can only afford to go to many colleges. You can only afford if you're willing to take on tens of thousands, possibly as much as $100,000 in debt. I've talked to real estate agents who say they can't sell houses to young people because they've already got a mortgage.
Right.
And that's not the way it used to be, and we need to change it.
Look, no question about it. I'm just, all of us are disappointed. This is a nonpartisan issue. College debt, access to higher education. This shouldn't be an RVD issue. This should be nonpartisan. There ought to be a way for everybody to get together.
The question is which direction you're going in. Are we going to go in the direction of more education or less? Before we end, I don't want to miss the health care. There are two different versions on health care. We're trying to provide more health care, and the Republicans are trying to take the health care you've got away and make it more expensive. That's another partisan divide. I think health care is one of the major issues. It was certainly a major issue last year in the General Assembly races, and I believe it's going to be an important issue, whether we ought to be helping people get insurance or whether we're going to be making insurance more expensive and harder to get.
Well, the short-term bipartisan answer is the one that Senator Tim Kaine has been behind, which is allowing people the public option to buy into the Medicaid system. You simply, we were
one vote in the Senate away from a public option on the Affordable Care Act, and I think that would go a long way in making health care available.
Absolutely, and so Republicans should back that because that is choice. If you don't want to buy it, don't. It's simple. If you want to buy it, you have the choice.
Well,
Republicans want choice.
Incredibly, there's one senator that said it'd be unfair competition if you allow people to buy a Medicare card. Unfair competition. That means you can get better insurance at a lower price. We can't have that. No, that's the partisan divide. I think you ought to be able to get that.
That is really ridiculous. I am so in favor of the public option, and it is the answer for Republicans in this debate. And it fits a conservative mantra, which is you want to give people choice. And to say, well, it's expanding a government plan. Medicaid is not going away. Medicare is not going away. Social Security is not. The post office is a government program, is not going away. So that's just an asinine argument. It's just dogma that doesn't make any sense that the Heritage Foundation
I wouldn't have used that word, but I'm certainly supportive of the public option.
Yeah, let's go with the public option. Okay, I'm out of time, but I got to ask you. Final question.
Or Medicare for all, Medicare as an option, either one.
Well, you got to do it as an option. If you do the Bernie Sanders plan, that's already been priced at $32 trillion. I mean, that's to me, that gets into a whole separate debate. There's very few people on the Trump or Republican side that want to see that. But you should have a public option. If you don't want to buy it, don't. It's very simple.
And if Bernie's right, people will buy. If Bernie is right, people will buy the public option, and they'll have that. They'll have that option.
They'll have the option. You just go with the public option, and you have to pay for it, just like you have to pay for anything else.
You pay the price. You pay the price. You average out what it costs, and then you pay the average.
And then
if there's subsidies for the private insurance, there'll be the same subsidies for buying into Medicare.
I'm all about choice. Now, I got to ask you the big question, Congressman Scott. How many games will the Washington Redskins win in 2018?
Well, after Rob Goodman said 9, I was going to say 8, but then I found out that's what you said. I don't want to.
So?
I'm a little scared. I'm up here agreeing with you. We agree on too much.
We do agree on too much because look, the number of things that you and I agree on way outweigh the things we don't, and that's why we get along so well. And there's just so many of them.
For us to agree on so much, that's not good. My constituents are going to look a little curious at that, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are going to look a little curious to you. So we got to find something more to disagree on.
They could never figure our relationship out. Nobody can figure it out. But it's all based on common sense. For the record, Bobby Scott and I, we might have been the only two people at the time in America we opposed both Iraq wars vociferously, and on both of them, we were 100% right. Congressman, I'm out of time. It's good to have you on your show just to validate how right I am on these issues every day. I mean, it's invigorating. Thank you, sir.
I'm glad I could help.
You didn't give me, is it 8 or 9 or 10? Washington.
I said 8.
8 games.
All right. After Rob said 9, I said 8.
Bobby Scott goes 8-8. Rob Whitman goes 9-7. Chap Peterson says 11. Scott Suravel says 3. All over the board.
And what does John Frederick say?
You know what? I'm not going to lock in at 8. I'm thinking maybe I'd be the contrarian here, and I go with Alex Smith throwing all these 6-yard passes, and maybe they somehow win 10 games. Let's go with that.
All
10.
Right.
8,
All right.
9, 10.
Sounds good.
All right. Congressman, thanks for being with us.